The air in the Austrian Alps was razor-thin and cold, carrying the faint scent of pine and wet earth. It was May 4th, 1945. The world below was a smoldering ruin of empires. Hitler was already gone, with his regime collapsing into rubble and ash in a Berlin bunker. But here in the tranquil Tyrolean Valley, a medieval fortress sat perched on a hill, holding a secret that was about to ignite the strangest battle of the entire Second World War. This is not a legend. This is the story of Castle Itter, where enemies became brothers. The fortress itself, Schloss Itter, was a picturesque anomaly. Built on a promontory, it had been a private residence, a hotel, and finally, a prison. Since 1943, the steel doors and barred windows held some of France's most precious political assets. Inside, locked away from the world, were former prime ministers, generals, and the sister of a legendary military leader. They were the trophies of a fallen regime, bargaining chips to be played in a final desperate hand. As the Allied news tightened, their captors had vanished into the night, leaving the VIPs alone, unguarded and terrified. Freedom smelled like mountain air, but it also smelled like danger. Descending from the hills were not saviors, but fanatics dressed in black. Prowling the alpine forests was the 17th SS Panzergrenadier Division, a brutal, vengeful unit, determined to crush any sign of defection. And between them and the French prisoners stood nothing but a single battered American tank crew and a rogue German officer. The man who set the impossible alliance in motion was Major Josef Sepp Gangl, a decorated Wehrmacht officer. By May 1945, the scales had fallen from his eyes. Disgusted by the atrocities of the SS, he shifted his loyalty from Berlin to his conscience. Stationed in the nearby town of Virgil, Gangl was planning to surrender his men to the Americans. When Gangl learned that the undefended castle filled with French dignitaries lay directly in the path of the SS rampage, he made a historic decision. He could not let them be swept aside. He would find the Americans and fight alongside them. Gangl climbed into a Kubelwagen and drove straight toward the American lines with a white flag fluttering from the hood. This was a dangerous ride where the SS would shoot him on sight. He found the advance elements of the 23rd Tank Battalion of the U.S. 12th Armored Division. The man he needed to convince was Captain John C. Jack Lee Jr., a straight-talking officer from Georgia. Lee had led his tanks through Normandy and the freezing hell of the Bulge. Gangl laid out the nightmare scenario featuring French hostages, an undefended castle, and a fanatical SS division closing in. Lee looked at the exhausted German major, saw the desperate truth in his eyes, and made the bravest call of his life. "Let's roll," he said. The rescue party was absurdly small. Captain Lee took his own Sherman tank, nicknamed Besotten Jenny, a crew of 5 and a handful of infantrymen. Alongside them were Major Gangl and about 10 of his loyal Wehrmacht soldiers. They rumbled through the narrow, pine-lined roads toward the castle. American G.I.s and German soldiers shared nervous glances with an invisible wall of 4 years of hatred sitting between them. They arrived at the gates just as the sun began to dip behind the jagged peaks. The reunion inside the castle was a fever dream of confused joy. The prisoners, led by former French Prime Minister Paul Reynaud and General Maurice Gamelin, peered out of their windows. They expected to see either the enemy or a full American division. Instead, they saw a strange, mixed column of olive drab and field gray uniforms rolling through the perimeter. The shock turned to a grim understanding. These were not conquerors, they were protectors. The French VIPs included Michel Clemenceau, son of the famous Tiger of World War I. There was Jean Baratra, a tennis superstar who had won Wimbledon. There was also Marie-Agnès de Gaulle, the resistance fighter sister of Charles de Gaulle. Jack Lee didn't waste a second. He scanned the ancient stone walls and knew the castle was a death trap. He ordered Besotten Jenny, positioned right in front of the gatehouse, blocking the main entrance. American riflemen took positions alongside Wehrmacht soldiers on the parapets, looking down their iron sights. A French prisoner even picked up a discarded weapon. As darkness swallowed the valley on the night of May 4th, the temperature plummeted. The defenders didn't sleep. They waited. Major Gangel slipped into the shadows to scout the enemy. His report confirmed that a heavily armed mechanized force was closing in inside the castle. The VIPs huddled in the Great Hall, the flickering candlelight bouncing off ancient armor displays. They could hear the distant, mechanical grinding of tanks and trucks echoing up the mountain pass. The sound was a predator circling its prey. The clock on the wall ticked toward dawn, each second a thunderclap in the silent room. The first crack of a Mauser rifle shattered the morning air. It wasn't a probe, it was a full-blown assault. Waffen-SS troops, wearing their distinctive camouflage smocks, emerged from the tree line like ghosts. They were elite, fanatical, and they attacked with terrifying speed. Machine gun fire erupted from the forest, stitching a deadly line across the castle's stone facade. Bullets snapped overhead, ricocheting off the shingles with a vicious whine. Captain Lee shouted orders over the chaos, his voice cutting through the din. Besotten Jenny roared to life, its turret traversing toward the muzzle flashes. The American tank commander, his crew working like a piston engine, fired the 76mm cannon, sending a thunderous shockwave that shook the entire valley. The tree line exploded into a cloud of dirt, splinters, and smoke. This was no longer a holding action, it was a siege. The Waffen-SS, realizing the gate was blocked by the Sherman tank, brought up their heaviest weapon, an 8.8-centimeter flak gun, the infamous 88, that terrorized Allied bombers, was rolled into position. They aimed it directly at the castle's main tower. The impact was apocalyptic. The shells smashed into the stone, punching a hole through centuries of history. The blast sent a volcanic shower of granite shards and dust cascading down on the defenders. Men were thrown off their feet, ears ringing, lungs filled with powdered rock. As the dust settled, the panicked eyes of the defenders saw a nightmare. SS troopers were now inside the lower courtyard. The noose was tightening. It was in this moment of chaos that the unthinkable nature of the battle became flesh and blood. A wounded Wehrmacht soldier, his uniform torn and bloody, was pinned down by a heavy SS machine gun nest firing from the gatehouse. An American medic, ignoring the tracer round zipping past his head, crawled across the exposed courtyard to drag the German to cover. A few feet away, a former French general was feeding a belt of ammunition into a German MG-42 machine gun, manned by an American G.I. The firing was deafening. The stench of cordite and burning oil was suffocating. They communicated not in German, English, or French, but in gestures. A nod, a pointed finger, a slap on the shoulder. This was the army of the absurd, a brotherhood forged not by nation, but by survival. Inside the castle's great hall, the situation was descending into a medieval nightmare. SS soldiers had taken control of the ground floor. The VIPs, former leaders of a global empire, were now trapped in the dungeon-like cellar. Paul Reynaud, the man who had led France during its darkest hours in 1940, was hiding behind a wine barrel. Michel Clemenceau, son of the Tiger, clutched a revolver, his knuckles white. The sound of boots echoed on the flagstones above their heads. They could hear guttural German shouts, the smashing of furniture, and the systematic searching of rooms. The SS were not just here to take the castle. They were hunting specific prizes. Major Gangel saw the desperate situation on the upper floors. He knew if the SS breached the cellar, a tragedy of global proportions would stain history forever. He rallied a mixed squad of his Austrians and 2 American G.I.s to push down the spiral staircase. It was a nightmare of close-quarters battle. The staircase was a tight, dark vortex of smoke and screams. Gangel led the way, his submachine gun firing into the shadows. They fought step by step, inch by inch, bayonets glinting in the muzzle flashes. A grenade bounced down the stone steps, the explosion, a gut-wrenching thump. The counterattack was savage and final. Gangel, the man who had started this alliance, was determined to push the SS back into the daylight. Up on the battlements, the situation was critical. Besotten Jenny had become the main target for every anti-tank rocket in the valley. A shaped charge rocket streaked down from a high ridge and slammed into the Sherman's engine deck. The explosion was blinding. The tank, their mobile fortress and biggest gun, shuddered and stopped belching thick black smoke. The crew scrambled out of the hatches, their faces smeared with soot and shock grabbing their small arms. The big gun was silent. A cheer went up from the SS lines. They surged forward, believing the castle's heart had been ripped out. They didn't realize that the loss of the tank simply transformed the American tankers into desperate infantry. For 6 hours, the impossible stand held. The defenders were running on fumes. Ammunition was ghostly low. The Americans were down to their last clips, the Germans to their last stripper clips. Captain Lee, his cigar long extinguished, received grim reports from every wall. The SS were massing for a final human wave assault. There were no more miracles left inside the castle walls. The defenders looked at each other. American, German, French, and a silent, stoic acceptance passed between them. They would stand. They would fire their last bullets. They had found something unexpected in the smoke. They had found a reason. Suddenly, a sound that was neither German nor French rolled up the valley. The rhythmic thumping of heavy machine guns and the sharp crack of a high-velocity cannon. Jean Barotra, the tennis champion, volunteered for a daring mission. He knew the local terrain. He had to reach the American relief column and guide them past the SS roadblocks. Vaulting over the castle wall, a move more athletic than anything he'd ever done at Wimbledon, he sprinted through a hail of gunfire. His elegant frame vanished into the woods like a phantom. He found the lead elements of the 142 Infantry Regiment. "Faster! They are falling!" he shouted. It was 4 about p.m. on May 5th. The Americans loaded their trucks with infantry and roared up the hill. The lead tank, a beast of fresh steel, smashed through the SS perimeter. The sound of the American tanks was the most beautiful music the defenders had ever heard. The 142nd Infantry swept through the lower compound like a cleansing fire, flushing out the remaining Waffen-SS, who suddenly realized they were the ones trapped. The relief force smashed through the gate, and the courtyard erupted, not in violence, but in an explosive, chaotic weeping relief. French prisoners stumbled out of the cellar, blinking in the sunlight. Wehrmacht soldiers, the enemy, were slapping backs with G.I.s. They had fought and nearly given everything side by side. The strangest battle of World War II was over. Against all logic, against all hatred, the castle had survived. But victory, as it always does, came at a terrible price. As the adrenaline cleared and the smoke drifted away, a somber silence fell over the cheering. Major Sepp Gangl, the Wehrmacht officer, who had the courage to defy a collapsing empire and save the innocent, was nowhere to be found. He had led the final push down the spiral staircase with fearless abandon. But in the white-hot fury of the close-quarters fight, a sniper's bullet found him. The man who built the bridge between enemies lay still on the ancient stone floor. He had entered the battle as a defeated soldier, but he left it as a hero of the free world. He is still remembered today, on a plaque at the castle, honored not as a German major, but as a defender of humanity. The sun set on the Tyrolean valley, casting a golden glow on the shattered windows of Castle Itter. The road leading away from the fortress was a river of mixed uniforms. American jeeps carrying Wehrmacht soldiers. French politicians shaking the hands of the tankers who had rescued them. As the prisoners were evacuated, they looked back at the battered silhouette of the castle. It was no longer just a prison. It was the stage for a fleeting, miraculous moment of clarity in a world gone mad. In the final count, one man had fallen to protect his former enemies. The battle proved that sometimes the line between good and evil doesn't run between countries or flags, but straight through the human heart. The castle stood battered but unbroken, a monument to the day the war stopped and humanity won.